What's good, everybody? Welcome to a brand new series that we are embarking on, a brand new perspective. That is going to be the title of this series. Thank you for being here with us on this journey, and thank you for allowing us to be on this journey with you. I am delighted to be hosting this wonderful and inspiring series with the wonderful Kalisha. How you say your last name? Lachey? Lachey?
Alicia Lachey, yes.
Kalisha Lachey. And she is a shadow work coach. And looking into your work, you do a lot of dope things. You're inspiring a lot of people, and you're doing the work yourself too. And that is worthy of praise. And I'm honored to be in this space with you today. And today we got a couple of topics that we're going to be talking to you all about today. We're going to be talking to you about boundaries. We're going to be talking to you about forgiveness. And we're also going to be talking about stepping into your transformation. And as we go throughout this series, we're going to have these conversations, and they're going to be interactive as well. So that way you can also become the greatest version of yourself, because these topics are pivotal for your growth as well. So without further ado, we're going to start with stepping into transformation, right? And I feel like this is the catalyst to everything else that we're going to be talking about today on this episode. Stepping into your transformation. And I do have a couple of notes here as well. And the thing that came to mind when I was meditating on this topic, right, is that a lot of us go through certain experiences in our life, right? And that is what starts the transformation stages or period in our lives, right? It starts the transformation. But sometimes when we create these new ideas and new versions of ourselves, we don't fully step into those versions because we're so attached to the identity of who we once was. And so when you find yourself in certain circumstances and certain situations, right? You're being introduced to people as the new version of yourself, but you're not showing up as that new version of yourself because you're thinking in your mind that everybody is going to look at you as people previously looked at you. But these new environments that you're in are bringing you evidence to show you that you have become and you have stepped into the newest version of yourself, right? And so transformation is an ongoing journey of evolving into the best version of yourself. And oftentimes it involves embracing change, overcoming fears, and taking proactive steps towards your own personal growth. I do have a couple of key points as well, but I want to get your opinion on this as well, as far as the transformation process goes and what it means for you to step into that transformation, right? And what that process looks like.
I love this. I love this conversation. I feel like the number one thing when we think about transformations, I like to think of them because we think about transformation, we think it's like just this all-encompassing thing. Um, Sometimes I feel like that is a lot to chew though. And in our life, as we heal in layers, right? Because every layer looks different than the previous. So, like what you mentioned, as far as like showing up to these new spaces, um, a lot of times as we transform, which is what allowed us to show up to these new spaces, that's what opened the door to these new spaces. We tend to try to carry on the baggage. We try to take our past identities, which leads to a lot of dysregulation and um, discomfort because we try to show up again to these new spaces with the old self.
Mm.
And as we're shedding, like we're still attached to it. So I think one of the biggest, well, two of the biggest things when it comes to these transformations is one, like breaking it down. And the first thing is we can't have transformation without an integration.
Mm.
And in order to integrate, we have to go through the process of awareness and acceptance. Awareness of self, awareness of how we show up in the world, awareness of how we show up in our relationships, awareness of our external environment, and then an acceptance of who we are, how we're changing, how kind of having this balancing act of who we are, but also who we are meant to be, right?
Mm.
So trying to balance all of that. And again, that is all part of this like integration, because the only way that we can truly be in alignment with self is to integrate ourselves and to accept all the parts of ourselves. So to accept like, hey, yesterday I accepted this. You know, we are going to talk about boundaries. Like yesterday, this was okay for me in this relationship, but today, not so much.
Mm.
And giving ourselves permission to like no longer accept it. I think that's the hard part is like we show up to these relationships that, you know, the same relationships, maybe a friendship or partnership, romantic relationship. And I know for me in my healing journey, the hardest part for me was having this like sense of imposter syndrome,
Mm.
because it was like I'm trying to show up different in the same relationship. So like I stunted my own growth because in my head I'm going through all the self-limiting beliefs of like this person saying, who do you think you are? Like who she thinks she is, trying to say no, but we were just doing this yesterday.
Mm.
But it's like giving ourselves permission to just shift.
Mm.
It's like it's just more so about the path to like the path of least resistance, ultimately.
That's powerful. I like that. I like that. You know, you said a lot of fascinating things. And the one thing that comes to my mind, right? Integration. I feel like integrating is one of the key facets of transformation. Like it's the most important key. And I did make a quote. I did a video about this not too long ago. And in the video, one of the quotes I said is that part of your healing journey and part of your transformational journey is when the voice in your head becomes or integrates with the person that you're growing into. Because, like you said before, you feel like you have this imposter syndrome, and that voice in your head is telling you, like, this ain't you. Like, why are you even trying to pretend to even be this? Because it's not who you truly are. And I feel like that in itself is the journey. It's just integrating that voice into the person that you are growing into. And so I feel like that imposter syndrome is just an indicator letting you know that you are growing in the proper way. Because a lot of times we don't really have an identity. We just kind of attach ourselves to things that we desire to be like. And so we go on this journey. Like you said before, we've had previous conversations. You feel like, well, if I do this in the way that this person is doing it, I will get their same results, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then our results look different from the people that we see doing the work. And I feel like it's so unique because we're all just reflections of each other. Like you are another me, right? I am another you. And so we come together in these rooms and in these moments, and we are highlighting the transformations that we are having in our lives because you're showing me that, oh, I'm showing up differently now. And I'm showing you the same thing. And I was listening to something too yesterday, and it was like, essentially your vibe attracts your tribe, right? Or your vibe or your environment, should I say, is an indicator of letting you know where you are in your life, like what frequency you're on. So if you see things in your life that aren't really appealing to you and don't really represent the growth that you're having, that just means that there's something within you that you need to work on, right? Because when we do go on these journeys, you're going to discover more of the things that you don't want rather than the things that you do want. Because I feel like that's what this journey is all about. It's just understanding more and more and more of, okay, this ain't me, that's not me, that's not me. Oh, there I am. Let me go towards this direction because I can see myself in this direction, right? And so it takes us on this journey where we're always met at this crossroads where we're making decisions in our lives. And part of transformation is decision making too. when you just decide and you just make the decision, right? To say, this is what I'm going to say, this is what I'm going to do, this is where I'm going to go. And have no regrets and have no second thoughts about the direction that you decided to go into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I always say, like, one of my biggest things is we should not really have regrets, because you either have one of two things. You either have a win
Mm.
or you have a lesson, right?
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
maybe the lesson was, you know what, I don't want to make that decision again.
Mm.
And if it's a lesson, truly it's a win. So either way, like, I can't lose. Again, the brand new perspective. It's really just, as we go through these shifts, as we peel back these layers, and as we grow and develop, it is, we are understanding that it is all meant to be. It's all happening for us.
Mm.
Nothing in life happens to us, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Even my trauma, like, I'm grateful for. And it took me a long time to get there. Don't This is not something that just happens overnight.
Right.
But I'm grateful for my trauma, because if it wasn't for my trauma, it wouldn't allow me to be in the space that I'm in today. It wouldn't have gotten me on the journey of really being so empathetic for other people and having a deeper love and passion for helping others to heal, that have been in similar spaces. So if it wasn't for the things that I deem as negative in my life, that friction, that turbulence, that we talk about, like, I wouldn't be vibrating on the level that I am today.
Mm.
Because I think the greatest wins in life are not due to just the things that floats like smoothly, right? It's when we have that resistance. It's when we are able to be in these new rooms and test our transformation, test that growth,
Mm.
test like, have I really learned, or am I going to repeat this pattern and go through again?
Right. That's powerful. I like that. Testing your transformation.
Mm-hmm. I
I
just
like
that was good.
I like testing your transformation. I think that's the key. That is the
Yeah.
key right there. It's like, once you've done the work, now it's time to put it to the test.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to enter in that old experience to see how much you've grown, or maybe you need to enter into this new experience and see how much more growth you have to go.
Right.
And that's so important. You know what? A coach of mine, or should I say a mentor of mine, and he was saying something similar to what you were saying about growth and transformation and how it can be like traumatic, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
whenever you're growing and whenever you're evolving, and whenever you're striving for success, you're going to feel that fire. You're going to feel that pressure. And sometimes that pressure can be traumatic, right? And we can break down what trauma is and things of that nature too, to try to get a deeper scientific understanding of what it is and how it affects the brain. Because there's this thing called PTSD, right? Everybody knows what that is, right? But there's also another thing that's not talked about, and it's called PTG, right? Post-traumatic growth. And I feel like that's something that a lot of us experience whenever we're going through the transformation phase. And it happens when we're being introduced to new aspects of our life, right? We're being introduced to new things that we've never been introduced to, right? Or exposed to. And where most people will probably crumble under certain situations, some people would take that same thing, that same situation, that same circumstance, and they would use that to say, okay, I can overcome this. Like, oh, okay, this is what the setback looks like. I bet I'm gonna just move forward. I'm gonna go ahead and persevere because I know that this is only here to teach me a lesson. This isn't my permanent destination. This is just somewhere that I needed to be in order to understand the power I possess. And a lot of us don't know the power we possess until we're put to the test, until that power is being tested to be like, oh, I didn't even know I had that in me. Like, for me, whenever I first started doing this, like when I started sharing my journey and really started getting into my self-development, there was things that I was doing that I really didn't understand, or I had a sense of like imposter syndrome about it, right? Because I was like, why am I even doing this? Who's really going to listen to me, right? What am I even talking about? And then you had naysayers that were kind of like feeding into that same feeling, that same frequency. But as I continued to press on, I began to notice the changes that was happening in my life, right? I began to notice that, I was growing and I was evolving because no matter what, I never allowed those circumstances or those naysayers to keep me at a certain frequency. I always rose above. Yeah. But I wouldn't have been able to know how high I could rise if that pressure was never applied, right? Yeah. Me and you can relate to this, right? As far as like being in the military, right? We're both, we both been in the military. I'm currently in. And when you're first going through basic training, I feel like that is the most traumatic, most stressful time of your life, right? But when you look back at it now, you say like, you know what? I accomplished something great. And I see the changes within me based on those experiences that I had. And having a conversation with a friend of mine, we were talking about it. He was like, he's never in the military, nothing like that. But he was like, yo, going through something like that must have really shaped you and gave you like all of this structure because I see the way you move and you don't move the same way, right? And I feel like we don't recognize that until we actually put in these positions and in these rooms for it to be identified like, oh, you've changed or oh, you're growing, And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I don't know how many times, and I mean, one of the things, because I joined the military, I was a little older than everyone else. Most people join fresh out of high school. And I joined, I was 26. So I knew, like, I quit the corporate world to join the Army. So I knew it was a mental game. Like, that's how I went into it. Like, I was like, this was, honestly, I think I was tried more physically than anything because your girl couldn't do a push up for nothing. Okay. Like, when I joined, so I knew it was like more mentally stimulating than anything. And I think that's really what helped me to thrive and really get through even the physical challenges. A lot of the resistance that I had, even though, like, I don't know how many times I wanted to quit. I was like, who signed my name on this contract? Because I didn't. I didn't sign up for this. I don't want it. But it definitely helped to shape. I will say, like, one thing I'm always grateful for is, the structure that the military gave. And I think, I mean, it's not for everybody, but I feel like everybody should have a little taste of going through like a mini boot camp, if you will, because it really did expand me. I learned so much. And I think this is truly where I found my love of like psychology and love of like watching people and learning behavior, and why people do the way they do, why we think the way we think, and how that relates to our traumas. And that's like my bread and butter. I want to delve into all the deep dark stuff. But it really helps to expand you in a way. And being in the military too, like, you get to see and experience so many different cultures, so many people with different backgrounds and experiences, and the way that you bond with others and get to really truly, like, because you got plenty of time, there's no social media and all that, so you ain't got nothing but time to talk about stories and things like that. And it just expands you in a way that I think that definitely helped along with the transformation. As far as I think the military helped me to see the things that I needed to release. I think the process of being in the military and seeing all that you see and deploying and, the being under different, like in different units with different leadership, like, I mean, honestly, I feel like you can relate the military to life. Like, it's, it's kind of the same thing, being able to flow. And there's a lot of times where you feel like as especially as like when you're lower enlisted, you don't feel that you have a lot of autonomy. Just like a lot of people in life, they think, oh, I'm in this circumstance, I'm in this military, I'm in this situation, and I don't really have power. I don't have a say. And I have been in that mentality, and it leads to a lot of being in like a survival mode, right? Like we're in this like mindset of I gotta like do this and do that, and I gotta like fight, like just be in fight or flight mode all the time.
Mm.
And I feel like in life, as we go through these transformations, I think it puts us in that state, that mental state of wanting to naturally, our mind and body want to be in that fight or flight mode because we're in dysregulation. Because
Mm.
as we're showing up to these new spaces, it's a lot of times that these rooms are they got doors and windows and decor that we ain't never like seen, right? Like we've never encountered, may not have even imagined. I know that's how it was for me. Like I would enter into a room and it was like, this is better than I even thought. Like I wouldn't have imagined this. Like how you said, like a lot of the goals that you have behind you, things are manifesting and coming to fruition. And it's just like, it's just a beautiful thing to see. But like you said, that what did you call it? PTG.
Oh, PTG, yeah.
That PTG, that like, yeah, that needs to be talked about more because sometimes we show up to these new spaces. Sometimes we get these things that we've always imagined or never even allowed ourselves to imagine. Because let's be real, like sometimes people are so used to being in these like toxic environments and being attached to that past identity, that past self, that accepted less than, that reinforce these beliefs that we have because we're attached to like our trauma, our circumstances, our past decisions and all the things. But we don't talk about when we show up like how dysregulating that is to finally find a person that loves you for you and you
Mm.
find this peaceful relationship and how dysregulating that can be.
Mm.
And that leads to us like that is when that test that is when that test comes because
Yeah.
we have the choice to either one, again, the path to less resistance, or to like still show up as our old self and then cause more friction in our life, kind of
Mm.
elongating our healing journey a little bit.
Nah, for
I,
sure.
I went on a tangent there.
That's good. That's good though. It's really good. But that's the truth though. Like everything, like you said before, in our lives is just like an indicator, right? It's just showing up and presenting itself to let us know where we are, right? And to really test our fortitude to see if the work we've been putting in is truly valid, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have a couple of key points through that I want to share, and then we'll get into the next topic. So when it comes to this is in conclusion, right? To stepping into transformation. So a few things that you want to consider whenever stepping into your transformation is, for one, embracing change, to accept that change is a natural part of life and view challenges as an opportunity for growth, right? The second point is to set clear goals, set clear intentions, and define what transformation means to you and create a roadmap with actionable steps. A lot of people like to make these 5-year plans, and I think that's a beautiful thing. But maybe you should start by making like a 5-day plan or even a 5-minute plan, right? Really break down and compartmentalize your goals that you're trying to achieve because it always starts in the micro, right? And it leads to the macro. So really break down and define clearly what you want your goals to be. And this will allow you to step further into that transformation that you are seeking. And finally, the last point is cultivate self-awareness. Reflect on your strengths and areas of improvement. And also practice mindfulness to stay present and focused. A lot of us get caught in the past and a lot of us get stuck in the future. But you need to be able to focus on the present and what's happening right now in front of you in order for you to move forward. Because the past is the past and the future is yet to be seen or yet to be experienced. The biggest thing is being present with who you are and being honest with who you are as well, which allows you to be honest with the person that you are becoming because you recognize and identify the things that you need to work on and the things that you currently possess. So those are going to be the three keys that you can use to become the greatest version of yourself and truly step into that transformation that you seek.
Yes.
Now, now we're going to be talking about boundaries. And I feel like boundaries is something that is so pivotal to transformation because once you become this person, now you must set parameters for what is tolerable and what is intolerable, right? Because a lot of people will test you, especially the people that knew you for who you once was.
Yes.
So, and this will test you as well to see how solid your boundaries are, how solidified your boundaries are, right? So, setting boundaries is essential for maintaining healthy relationships and protecting your mental and emotional well being. And it also involves clearly identifying what is acceptable and what is unacceptable in your interaction with others. Now, I'll be honest. When I was growing up, I was a people pleaser. Like I was always the nice guy, right? The kind guy. I don't like the word nice, but I was always kind, right? I treated everybody fairly with respect, always with a smile and things of that nature. But it got to a point where there would be those that would take advantage of that kindness. And because I didn't know how to set boundaries for myself, I was under the impression that, well, if I continue to be kind to these people, they will understand and respect the boundaries that I did not have, right? Make it make sense. I want people to respect the boundaries that I don't have. So, like we talked about before with transformation, everything is just an indicator letting you know where you are. And so, history history doesn't really repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And what I mean by that is you'll find yourself in certain circumstances that are going to identify if you've learned how to set boundaries or not, right? So, like, say for instance, you finally set a boundary. Okay, cool, bet. You're gonna find yourself in another circumstance that's different but similar, and that's going to test whether or not the boundary that you set for yourself is solidified. Because sometimes you can slip up and be like, "Oh, dang, I did it again," right? But now you're more aware of the fact that okay, this boundary needs a little more work, right? So I want to hear from you too, as far as like boundaries goes, and what are your thoughts on boundaries? How do you feel about boundaries, and how were you able to set boundaries in your life, and what do they look like now today?
So boundaries are something like you. I was a people pleaser. I
Mm,
was a please everybody else but me
mm,
person. Um, and I was pretty dedicated to helping make other people comfortable.
mm,
In the midst, I was very uncomfortable. Um, I was in a lot of relationships, and again, this is a lot of things. Whether it was work, whether it was friendships, whether it was romantic relationships, I would go above and beyond for other people and do all the things, but yet I had no boundaries.
mm,
Um, and I think too, it's important to also talk about like how that how we got to that point, right? Like because a lot of it was reinforced from growing up.
mm,
Um, I think with the older generations, and at least in my family, it was a big thing, like family. Like it's like we always do for family, whether it's monetarily, whether it's, just showing up for somebody. Like we support family and we show up no matter what. Even
mm,
if even if they crossed a boundary and whatever the case may be, like we still show up for family.
mm,
And I will say that was one of my hardest things was to enforce boundaries in family relationships and also friendships because of these titles. Because, oh, that's my mom. Oh, because that's my best friend. Oh, because that's this person and we go way back. I was
Mm.
just so attached to being the good girl that I didn't want to cause friction. And again, meanwhile, I'm uncomfortable. I am
Mm.
not happy. I am not fulfilled in my relationships. And it took me a long time to get to the point of like, girl, you can change this. you can you can completely change this dynamic. And I think a lot of people, I think how it shows up in our lives, a lot of people don't even realize it's a boundary problem. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
they just know that maybe they got this friend that they talk to that they always end up feeling drained with after they talk to them. Or maybe it's a partner or something that they just start noticing like this person's pretty negative. Like they have a pretty negative outlook on life. That's a
Mm.
boundary problem.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't realize, and I think that's it's important to really get into the what it looks like. You know, when you I actually made a video about it, is like how you know your boundaries aren't boundarying.
Mm.
Because
Right.
a lot of people don't realize, you know. So I always tell people if you find yourself in any of these negative emotions of like constantly being frustrated or annoyed or triggered, and that's the number one sign that we need a boundary, or we need to like enforce one that we have. So yeah, I didn't have boundaries when I was growing up, and
Mm.
even in my like 20s, like it. And this is something I'm still practicing. This is again, this is a process, I think once we even get to a point of being able to like master one like type of boundary, or maybe one specific thing, like something else shows up and it's like, oh, I need a boundary there.
Mm.
So again, that just leads into the like self-awareness conversation. But for me, um one of the biggest things that I had was staying in conversations that I was uncomfortable with.
Mm.
So I don't know how many times, whether it was with a male or a female, it was just sometimes like I would listen to people like trauma dump and you know, just share all their stuff. And I'm sitting up here like, we didn't talk about this. I don't know how many times.
God.
I'm sitting there like, can we talk about something positive? You know what I mean? Like I don't, and I don't know how many times like I'm sitting there listening because again, I was a people pleaser. So I was trying to let someone unload because if they're unloading, most likely they didn't have a safe space. And I found myself throughout my life being a safe space for someone. Um, but now I have learned to shift and make small steps so that I can still be that safe space with boundaries.
Mm.
So now a lot of my friends will ask me, hey, do you have the capacity to hold space for me? Like,
Mm.
don't just call me and like, I won't, very rarely will I allow that. And a lot of times I'll like, and I don't know how hard this was for me to be able to just be like, hey, I don't have the capacity right now. That's one of my favorite things to tell people. I don't have the
Mm.
capacity.
Mm.
And I think before it was really hard for me to set that boundary because I was so tied to what that meant. That meant I'm a bad person. That meant I'm not a good friend. That meant like all these things. But it's like, we don't have to make it mean more. Guess what? I just don't have the availability for this right now. And that's okay. Because even though I'm in school to be a counselor, like
Mm.
I'm not your counselor. And that doesn't mean I have to, I can still support you and
Mm.
not necessarily like have to be the person that you trauma dump on every time you have something occur.
Mm.
So I think it's just making those little small steps and speaking up for ourselves when we find ourselves in those uncomfortable feelings, when we feel that anxiety or that frustration or whatever building up in our bodies, to just be aware of it.
Mm. Yeah. Nah, for real. Boundaries is, man, that's a whole topic within itself. Like,
It is.
I feel like it's so new too. Like, I feel like it's not, but at the same time, it's new because of how it looks, right?
Yeah.
And you said something that was true. It's like a lot of people don't realize that the things that they're doing is actually a boundary problem, right? It's a boundary issue. And a lot of people don't recognize like it's really just about having common sense and just reading the room and reading people like, okay, you don't look like you want to you're in a state to really take in what it is that I'm putting out, right? So let me just come back to you at a different time, or let me shift the conversation and maybe pour into you so that way, whatever it is going on with me, it's able to get reconciled throughout the conversation, right? But I think that's just understanding people, right? I feel like we live in a time where people just don't know how to people, if that makes sense, right? I kind of got that quote from a song. It's like a song that had affirmations in it, and one of her affirmations was like, "Our people wiser," meaning that we're we're like creatures of conditioning, right? Like we operate off of conditions and habits and repetition, right? And I feel like that whenever we're interacting with each other, we're conditioning each other to be treated how we want to be treated, right? We're conditioning each other to treat each other how we want to be treated. So it's like I'm showing you how I like to be treated, and then you're showing me how you like to be treated, right? And part of setting boundaries is understanding other people's boundaries as well, because you as a people pleaser, you kind of already have that, or as a I'll say ex people pleaser, right? You kind of already have the idea of how boundaries work, because even though you wanted to make sure people were good, you also didn't want to step on nobody's toes and make them feel a way around you, right? And in a sense, that's practicing boundaries because you're mindful of how other people feel around you, right? Mm-hmm. But once you start setting boundaries, now you are letting other people know how to feel when you're around, right? Mm-hmm. You start to affect the energy in the room and things like that, right? You said something else too, like about staying in conversations that are uncomfortable. And here's the thing that I found throughout my journey, right? For some reason, people love to confide in me, right? Mm-hmm. I never understood why. I'm just like, bro, why are you telling me all this? And they'll tell me, they're like, I don't know why I'm telling you all this, dog, but they'll just keep on going. Yeah, I was like, and some very intimate detail.
At the grocery store.
Right? Like, okay. Thank you for that, I guess. And I think that just comes from being a healer. Like when you do the work on yourself, you become a healer. Now, it's not to say that it's your responsibility to heal, but you just like a moth to a flame, you just attract people that need that healing. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people just either don't do the work or don't know how to start doing the work, right? Even though they're given ample opportunities to start, they just don't know how to just step into that, right? And so people like us show up in their lives, and we highlight the facets of their life that needs work. And one thing that I started doing when I find myself in these conversations is that I'm just brutally honest. I'm just like, okay, well, what are you doing about it? Like, are you doing anything about it? And then I'll give you some tools. I'll give you some tips, some tricks. And I'll be like, well, listen, look, start here, right? Like, don't tell me no more, but start here. And once you start here, if you've started to fix the problem, okay, now we can, have a conversation. Now we can probably operate a little more, but if you're just somebody who just wants to dump and don't want to fix it, there's nothing I can do for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I can listen to you all day, but you probably do the same thing to others too, which means that you revel in being in your own conflict. Like, you just love being in the conflict and you love talking about the conflict that you're in. You're not really resolution oriented. So people like us come around, and I feel like once we set the proper boundaries on people, bro, it it changes how they interact with you, right? Because you let off a different energy. Like, yeah, I'm kind, I'm a healer, but I don't play that. Like, you got to come correct. It's just that simple. You got to come correct, and you got to really come with the openness to accept solutions and actually act on those solutions.
I think that's the beautiful thing. Oh,
go ahead.
Interrupt your wisdom, King. But that's the beautiful thing to me about like being at this level of like self-awareness in our healing journey. Like I find it so delicious to ask questions. Because when a person is talking, you can tell if they're more problem focused or solution focused. And naturally, we want to vent, right? But you can tell because if you ask questions where you're like, okay, well, how would you if you had all the resources and no restrictions, like how would you solve this problem? Right?
Mm.
Like you start to get to ask questions that would allow them to kind of expand because a lot of people don't think like that. They don't think like, oh wait, like I can create a solution. Let me that starts to create some like fire some synapses that like weren't previously firing.
Mm.
And it allows people like we plant seeds. I
Mm.
feel like we are always gardening in our life. We're gardening ourselves, trying
Yeah.
to water, trying to like fertilize and all these things. But it's
Mm.
like as we're doing that, we're also doing the same for other people. Now, one thing I will say is like sometimes it's not always that instantaneous thing because I don't know how many conversations I've left that I was just like, yeah, this person, they didn't. But a seed was planted. And there have been times that later, whether it was months, years, whatever later, that they had come back to me and shared something that led to like this transformation for them later down the line. It was something that I said, or maybe even something that I did that just helped them to kind of shift and have this brand new perspective
Mm.
that creates all the space of like opportunity. And I
Mm.
think that's like the key to being able to move forward into the like transformation as we're setting boundaries and everything is
Mm.
we get to see. And it's so side note, I was in a conversation with a friend yesterday on video chat,
Mm.
and we're just talking and catching up, and next thing I know she jumps and she screams because there's this cricket that's on the sidewalk. Why do I bring this up? But it made me think, and I don't know, it's just the shadow work mind is like it's always like trying to equate everything to life.
Right.
That's so crazy because I'm like, that's how we end up being sometimes. We're so focused on this one little thing. You freaking out about this cricket. You got all the rest of the sidewalk to walk. You got the
Mm.
rest of the space. But we're
Mm.
so focused on that one thing, on that problem, and thinking like, oh, I'm freaking out because of this one thing, but we have all this space and opportunity.
Mm.
So it's really being able to ask these questions to people as they're venting, as they're like, maybe being more problem focused, that allows them to expand in a way to like say, hey, wait a minute. Like it's valid what you're talking about. And I understand, like, I can only imagine being in your shoes, but have you thought about this?
Mm.
Like, have you looked over there? Because there's this like path over here that's got a little brush, but it's there.
Right.
You got this opportunity to go this way and change the narrative and change the whole trajectory of your story.
Mm.
And I think that's really what it's about. So setting the boundaries in the sense that sometimes we get to a point where we can set the boundary without even really like without a person even knowing.
Mm. True. True indeed. Another thing too, and I'm gonna end it like this too. Be prepared to look like the bad guy when you set
Right.
boundaries, because people are gonna think that, oh, you're mean, you're a behold, you're just all of these negative things, right? But when you're somebody who people know as being who they know you to be, and you actually start to set boundaries, you start to cut conversations short, you actually just start saying just like, nah, I'm just gonna walk out the room and give no explanation. That's when people start looking at you like, oh, you different, or you think you better. It's like, nah,
Mm-hmm.
I respect myself. I love myself. Like, and I understand, like, if my energy don't feel right here, if something feels off, I listen to that and I act accordingly based on that feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it is. It's like setting boundaries, just trusting your intuition, just trusting your gut, trusting that if it don't feel right, it probably ain't right. If the
Mm-hmm.
conversation don't feel good, it probably ain't good, you know. But just be prepared to look like the bad guy, because that's how people are gonna see you until they recognize, like, oh, okay. And that's where respect comes too, right? Even if they don't like it initially, when they come back to you, they gonna respect you. They gonna understand, like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna do that because last time you did this, so boundary has been set. You know not to cross that line no more. So just be prepared to look like the bad guy, which is okay. Everybody, you're a bad guy in somebody's story anyway. You know,
Yeah.
we're all just walking around with various interpretations of one another. Like
Mm-hmm.
you see me one way and somebody else can see me an entirely different way. Like to you, I could be the good guy. To someone else, I talk too much. To another person, oh, he's the bad guy. Like there's just so
Yeah.
many various interpretations of us walking around. And
Yeah.
so once you set that boundary, it just solidifies who you are to everybody. Because when somebody else has a different perspective of you and they meet somebody else with a different perspective of you, they both have this understanding of the boundary that you set. So it's like, well, they know about this boundary. They know not to cross that line. So they both got that understood. So with
And
that being, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, too, I think it's important to realize that boundaries are not only to be set for other people.
Mm.
We should be setting boundaries for ourselves.
Mm.
I think that's so, like, that's more important, honestly, than setting boundaries for other people. Because, like you said, we teach people how to treat us. And I'm gonna go back, excuse the vernacular, but can't nobody treat you worse than you treat you.
Mm.
So if you are showing up in a sense of like disrespecting yourself in some way, silencing yourself, making yourself small, it's going to be a reflection because, like we talked about, everything outside of us is a reflection of us. So once we start to set boundaries with ourselves, being showing up in a more authentic light, which means listening to that intuition that says, "Hey, I'm uncomfortable here. I don't I don't like this conversation." You know, one thing that um, I had to go off of social media for some time because some years ago on Facebook, like I had a lot of people that would post like fighting videos and stuff.
Mm.
And I remember scrolling down my timeline and I just had this thing like I don't watch it because I don't like what does that get me? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I don't get any value out of that. And I remember being so uncomfortable going down my timeline. And then it's like, girl, like delete these people. You know what I mean? If that does not align with you. So it's like we can, even in small steps like that, setting our own boundaries, noticing and having the self-awareness when we are feeling these uncomfortable feelings. If you
Mm.
are not, if it does not make you feel good, like, we need to evaluate it. We
Mm.
need to evaluate our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with our friends, with our family, all the things.
Mm.
And it's just so important for us to realize, like, yeah, we set the standard. It's
Mm.
not boundaries are not to change other people's behavior. It's to say, hey, this is what I'm available for,
Mm.
and this is what I'm not. But I think the fear of setting boundaries is because we're in fear of criticism or judgment
Mm.
or being canceled
Yes, sir.
or for someone to not love us or accept us.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, it's like if you're really thinking that way, you are basically saying that other people are more important than you. So I think if we break it down, because I think like boundaries is, like you said, it's such a big topic. Like we could literally talk about this for hours. But
Yeah.
we need to just break it down and set little ways that we can like enforce these boundaries, in little ways that we can have these boundaries in certain aspects of our life. And it doesn't have to be this grand thing like, oh yeah, I'm just going to be a completely different person tomorrow. But it starts with the little things. So noticing in the conversations that we have that make us uncomfortable, or noticing how we feel after interactions with people, like maybe we be so caught up in trying to like get someone to love us and accept us that, do I even like this person? do
Mm.
I, you know what I mean? Does this person actually even align with me?
Right.
Like showing up for ourselves, prioritizing ourselves is the key to us being able to get on that path of setting boundaries.
Mm.
And then as we set boundaries and enforce them within ourselves, we can do the same with other people. Because people are either gonna, I don't want to say it, but kind of like fall in line and they will align with our boundaries or support them at least,
Mm-hmm.
or we realize, guess what? We're not in alignment. And I think that's a lot of the fear, but it's like, what are you afraid of? Making
Mm.
space for people that are more in alignment with you? You know what I mean? Like you're afraid of like releasing people that don't fully support who you are authentically.
Mm, 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 mm.
So I think the more we prioritize ourselves and the more we really be on like are on the path of like self-love and acceptance, the boundaries will come.
Mm. Bars. Bars. That was a bar right there. Ooh, what are you so afraid of? Golly. What are we? What are you afraid of? That's good. That's good. I really like that. And we're gonna get into this next topic. First, before we get into it, I got a couple key points, right? About boundaries to end it all.
Okay.
So the first key point is recognize your limits, right? And folks home, y'all can take this home with you. Recognize your limits. Understand your personal needs and limits and communicate them clearly with others. I emphasize clearly because a lot of us can muddy our words to make it comfortable for others, but be clear and be direct. Like it's it's for you, it's for your benefit. Where however they take it is how they take it, but be clear and concise. The second point is assertiveness, right? Practice saying no without guilt. And let me tell you, I feel like no was one of those words that I really had to work on because I didn't know how to say no. But if I say no, I stand on it. So that's something that a lot of people can start practicing doing. Like, just start saying no, not to everything, but just start saying no and have no regrets about it.
Mm-hmm.
And stand firm in your boundaries with confidence. People can really see the confidence exuberating off of you whenever you start to set boundaries, and that solidifies it to let people know, like, oh, okay, they serious about this.
Yeah.
So assertiveness. And number three, respect for self and others. Encourage mutual respect by honoring others' boundaries as well as your own, and create a balanced environment of give and take. A balanced environment. It's okay to want to help others, right? But just don't do it at the detriment of your own self, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to take things too, because I know as people pleasers and things of that nature, you don't want to accept any gifts because it's like, oh no, nah, you good, you don't owe me nothing, whatever the case is. But it's okay to accept gifts. It's okay to accept offerings. It's okay to allow others to give you things to help you along your path, right? Because it's going to look good on the other end as well. So, yeah, that's boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're going to end it with this one. And I feel like this kind of ties it in all together, right? Forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness is one of those things that it should be practiced more. And I think forgiveness needs to be practiced not only for others, but for ourselves too, right? Because forgiveness equates to grace. Because we're not perfect. We make mistakes. We're not going to get it right all the time, every time. And so I feel like forgiveness is a daily thing. It's not just something like, oh, I forgive you and then that's it. Forgiveness is something that it happens on a consistent basis. Like you have to be kinder to yourself because if you continue to just beat yourself down so many times, you're going to lose confidence and you're going to feel as though you're not in a space to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. So if you get it wrong, forgive yourself. If you say the wrong things, forgive yourself. If you do something that's embarrassing, whatever, just forgive yourself, and forgive others as well, because sometimes they don't know what they're doing. They may not be aware of how what they're saying or what they're doing is affecting you. So just forgive others because they know not what they do. And so forgiveness is a powerful tool for healing and moving forward. And it involves letting go of resentment and embracing peace, both with yourself and with others. And so I want to know from you, how have you forgiven yourself, forgiven others? And what does that look like for you as far as like practicing forgiveness on a consistent basis?
So I definitely have a brand new perspective on the topic of forgiveness. I went live one day on this because I feel like it's a thing that we think, oh, I have to forgive this person so that I can heal and let go and all of these things. But I think a lot of us tend to get stuck in that.
mm,
especially if it's something that's deeply rooted in like a self-limiting belief that we have, or a trauma from our childhood, because there's some deep hurts out there, right? Like
mhm,
deep hurts that really, some people, it's like I can't even imagine forgiving the other person.
mm,
I think the key to it, though, we should not work on forgiveness.
mm,
And I think that's very controversial to say. Um, but I feel like once we do the work, the shadow
mm,
work, right, the personal development, um, once we do these things, we begin to heal the emotional content of what has occurred to us, or
mm,
what has occurred around us, whatever the case may be. As we heal, we, whether you do the therapy, whether you journal, whether you meditate, whether you get into plant medicine, you go on spiritual retreats, whatever it looks like for you, when you get the coach, it's like we get a little bit lighter as we heal. Like we talked about, like healing like onions, each layer looking different. It gets a little lighter, and we have a different perspective as we heal. So even though we may have been like doing this healing work on this like specific thing with this, like let's say like mom, because that was one of my biggest challenges growing up.
mm,
And but we get to a space where if I'm triggered by something with her, it may not necessarily be with the same exact like trauma that originally occurred, but it
mm,
looks a little different. Like my response to it is a little different, because yeah, I am showing up in this new space with because of transformation and growth and healing. However, I look at it a little differently. So
mm,
the response is going to be different. However, as we do that, things get lighter. We become more free. So I don't think forgiveness is something that we intentionally need to work towards.
mm,
The intention needs to be put towards healing,
mm,
understanding, okay, what happened to me? Okay, yeah, that happened to me. Feel the feelings, process the feelings. Then we can move on as far as, how did this shape me? How did this create maybe these beliefs that I have? How did this reinforce some patterns that I have? How did this show up in my relationships? And then we can begin to do, like, we get deeper in the healing and we start to show up different. How can I change this narrative?
mm,
Because I was really tied to and attached to this person that was the victim, but now I'm more empowered because of my healing journey. And
mm,
I think naturally forgiveness is, it's a natural byproduct of healing the emotional content of the things that we go through.
mm,
So I just, yeah, I don't think it's something that we need to actually be like, yeah, I need to forgive, because without doing that healing work, like there's some stuff that we would say is unforgivable, right?
mm, mm.
So
That's
that's a little different perspective that I have on it.
nah, that's a very interesting perspective. I've never heard it put that way. Instead of focusing on forgiving, focus on the healing.
Mm-hmm.
In healing, you'll be able to forgive, right?
Yeah.
What that sounds like to me is when you heal, you're able to let go. Like essentially, that's what forgiveness is. It's just letting go. It's just not holding on to things that just don't serve you anymore.
Yeah.
And I feel like with you, what you said with the healing, once you start going through that healing journey, you start to realize that certain things just don't bother you anymore. Like
Yeah.
somebody told me the other day, right, when I was this was probably a few months ago when I was at my unit. And somebody told me like you're just the most chillest, calmest, most relaxed person like I've ever seen before. And I'm just like, well, I've been doing the work on myself for so long is that certain things just don't bother me anymore. Like I just don't feel the need to address every single instance in my life because it's some things are just not that important, right? Like some things just don't need a reaction or a response. Some things you just be like, okay, I get it. I understand. You are where you are, I am where I am. And that's just what it is. And that is part of that forgiveness, right? I feel like the title it shouldn't even be forgiveness. I should just be like letting go, because that's really essentially what it's all about. It's just recognizing that something happened in your life and realizing that it no longer serves a purpose. And so once you're able to do the healing, the meditations, the breath work, all of these different things, it's like life carries a different meaning to you, and you walk around with that meaning of life with you. And so when you encounter certain people and they may do certain things, going back to boundaries, it just doesn't really affect you anymore. So it's like an automatic forgiveness. It just happens. It's just like, oh man, that's just that person. That's just who they are. That's just based on the experiences that I had. Because I'm sure if I were to stand in their physical shoes, I would probably be the same way. And so it gives you a whole nother vantage point to look at things, to say that, oh, this is bigger than just, or this isn't that big, should I say, right? Like there are things that are way more important than whatever this person did or this person said or whatever happened in the past. Like whatever issue that you may have had with family members, it's like you just understand that they went through something and maybe they didn't get introduced to healing like you got introduced to. And so when you see people now that you love and you come with this new perspective and you're all healed up, right? You've got your healing journey on par. People look at you different, right? Or people interact with you different, or should I say, you interact with people differently because you understand that, well, they had the opportunity, but they didn't take advantage of the things that were available to them in order for them to heal. And so part of all of that just ties into being a forgiving type of person. And it just shows it's not something that, like you said, you need to practice. It's just something that you are. You're just forgiveness. You are forgiveness.
Yeah. I think as we heal, yeah, we just naturally change our perspective. Like, mm, especially as we grow in our own self-awareness, as we become self-aware, like aware of self, we become more aware of our external environment. And for me, a huge transformation in my journey was understanding, like, yeah, you know what, my mom was not who I needed her to be at the time, but she did the best she could with what she had. Mm. And that led to, while I didn't like actively think like, oh, I need to forgive her, it just naturally came because it's like she did what she could. And right, there's things in my life that my current self does not agree with as far as my past self, like as far as maybe previous decisions or environments that I put myself in or stayed in. And but I'm not that same person anymore. I'm not, that is not me. That is not my identity. So I think as we heal and become, we vibrate on a higher level, like you said too. Another thing is we naturally, like, things won't touch us. Once you vibrate on a certain frequency, things that used to trigger you aren't as triggering anymore. We got new problems, more money, more problems. Like, it's new energy. We got new issues.
New energy, new issues.
So like I like to think of it as that, yeah, it's just not something we necessarily got to focus on, but it's naturally gonna happen. And that's a test of the transformation too, is how we respond to uh, things that have been triggering for us.
Wow. You know what? I feel like forgiveness is really just like, we don't even need to really go that deep into this because it really just ties everything else we've talked about into it. That was a mouthful, honestly. So I was just gonna give the points to forgiveness, and yeah, we're gonna wrap it up from here. So the thing about forgiveness, right? Here are the key points that you want when it comes to forgiveness, right? First off, you need to understand forgiveness, right? You need to recognize that forgiveness is for your own peace and not for the sake of others. And it's about releasing negative emotions and not condoning hurtful behavior, right? So that's kind of like boundaries. Like, just certain things you just don't condone no more. Like you just don't allow certain things in your energy field. Like you said, once you rise to a certain frequency, things just don't bother you no more. It's like it just rolls off your shoulders because you got new things to handle. You got new things to focus on, right? The second part is self-forgiveness. And that is acknowledge your mistakes and learn from them. Acknowledge that you made mistakes. You know what's funny about this, right? I used to, growing up, right? I used to always say, like, dang, why can't I never get things right? Because I would mess up more things that I got right.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to change my perspective on that because I had to understand that every experience that I had was new, or every experience that I felt like I messed up was new. And I've never done that before. So, of course, I'm going to mess it up at first. But then once I come back to that experience or that thing, I got it down pat. Like, okay, I got this figured out because I knew what not to do, or I learned a lesson from the experience that I had. So anything that you go into, give yourself grace, learn from the mistakes. And honestly, me personally, I look forward to making mistakes. I'll be honest. Like anything I
Yeah.
try, anything I experience, I'll just be like, look, I know I ain't gonna get this right the first time, but I don't care. I just want to go and experience it because I know that throughout this experience, I'm gonna meet a new aspect of myself and I'm going to learn something that I can carry with me for a lifetime. Right. And the next point is practice self-compassion and let go of self-blame. Like, don't blame yourself. Don't always be like, woe is me, right? Because that is just a energy that is not supportive. So don't blame yourself and be compassionate about with yourself, to yourself, right? You're growing as well. It's like no matter how like big in age we get, we're always growing and learning. So you have to be compassionate with yourself and others. And finally, forgive others. Empathize with others' perspectives and release grudges to free yourself from the past, right? I used to hold grudges about certain family members, but as I got older, as I progressed in life, I realized that they only work with what they had. You know, they did the best that they could with what they had. And if I was in their physical shoes, I would probably do the same thing because that's all I knew. So releasing grudges and letting go of like self-blame has allowed me to grow because now I can see the things that I need to do in order to make sure that I don't make the same mistakes or I just show up and do the best I can. And that was it. That was the last one. You have anything to say in conclusion?
Um, I'll just say I think this was a delicious conversation that needs to be had. The the path to transformation is a journey and it's
Mm,
never ending. The transformations are continuous.
mm,
And along that journey, we do need to learn to show up for ourselves, which in showing up, we are creating boundaries.
mm,
And in that process of showing up for ourselves and accepting and loving ourselves, we will grow to naturally forgive ourselves and others. And then it's a cycle because as we do that and we show up in this new space with these new, these new boundaries and everything,
mm.
or with this new like lighter energy towards things and people, we get to create the boundaries again. Like it's all a cycle because we have to create new boundaries for, how we want to show up. So I think it's a never ending journey. And I think just having the brand new perspective of not looking at it as so cumbersome, because it can be a lot, like life be lifing, right? Like when we
Yeah.
are tested with our boundaries, like folks be trying us, okay?
Oh, for sure. So,
But it's a test to really truly see our growth. It's an opportunity for us to see, okay, let me tweak this. Okay, like, oh, look at us. We reinforce this boundary. Like we out here.
mm,
It's just the opportunity to see how far we've come and where we're going.
Mm.
So just kind of changing our perspective to see the opportunity rather than the loss, or just focused on the work or the problem.
Mm.
Let's be more solution focused and just be open minded along the way.
For sure. For sure. For sure. This, I will say this conversation was designed to not just inspire or motivate or nothing like that, but it was really to encourage growth, because I feel like we're living in a time now where these type of conversations are being had more now, especially in our communities. And it's important because a lot of us are growing and transforming. And as the world evolves, we must evolve as well, which means that our conversations must evolve, which means that the way that we treat each other and treat ourselves must evolve. And so these conversations are designed to bring more awareness to the evolution of us as a people, because the things that once worked are no longer sustainable. And so it's up to us to bring forth that change by having these dialogues, by having these conversations, by having you, the people that are watching this, to really interact and utilize the keys and the points and the concepts that we're giving, so that way you can become the greatest version of yourself. So that way you can go back and share with your community how you were able to grow, because it's all about creating a spark, right? It's all about lighting the next candle. And you are the person that is going to be the spark if you're watching this. If you're watching this, you're the one that's going to be the spark for your community, because somebody needs to hear your voice. Like, when I first started on this journey, I didn't think that I had a voice. But the more you utilize it and the more you implement the things that we talked about today, the more you start to show up and the more you start to affect people in your life. And you won't even recognize the effect that you're having on people until later on down the road. So this is your sign that everything is going to work out greater than you expected it to. And
Mm-hmm.
so continue to tap in, continue to have the dialogue, continue to have the conversation, and continue to shift your perspective every single day, because that's what it's all about. And I always say, this is my saying, we do better when we grow together. So let's continue to grow with one another. You can't do this by yourself. I've tried. I've tried to do it by myself, and I got myself to a certain point, and then I realized I need help. I need
Mm-hmm.
I need a community. I need something to help me along my journey, because I only know what I know. I know what I know. I know what I don't know, and I don't know what I do know. Right. So I don't even think I introduced myself. Now that I think about
You know, I
it.
listen, I was about to interrupt, but I was like, you were on such a flow. I was gonna let you do it because I was like, you done hype me up, and you didn't even say who you are, sir.
I
So
did not.
carry on. Who are you?
So
Who is you?
I go by Paula A. Anthony. I'm just a guy on the internet talking about self-development. That's it. I've been on this self-development journey for years, and I share in my experience in helping others become the greatest version of themselves. That's it. You know, that's all I do. I love this. I love this journey.
I love the work that you're doing, and we were, it was definitely meant for us to be doing this. I'm so grateful, and yes, like this was a juicy conversation, and I look forward to more. That is a wrap with the first episode, y'all, of this series. We are raising the consciousness level. Words are hard. Raising the consciousness level of our community, a brand new perspective at a time.
Brand new perspective.
So until next time, y'all.
Peace and progress.